Hi guys, welcome to our lesson. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at the effects of unwise use of resources. What will happen if we use our resources unwisely, right? Or if we waste our resources. Right, the first thing I want us to look at is the resource use. So two things can happen when people use resources unwisely. Resources are damaged or resources are used up more quickly or they are depleted. Right, the effect of using resources unwisely is that they might not be available at all in the future. In other words, we are not practicing sustainable use of resources. Here are some ways that people use resources unwisely, like causing soil erosion by using poor farming methods, polluting resources such as water and air with chemicals from farms, mines, and industries, and wasting resources. For example, by leaving lights on, which uses electricity, and remember, electricity is made by burning coal, and it is an coal is a non-renewable resource. So these are some of the ways in which you can waste resources. This is why it's always wise for you to switch off all the lights that you are not using in the house to save energy and to save resources. Right. Other examples, not planting young trees to replace the trees that have been cut down. This is the process of reforestation. Using machinery that waste resources or use them efficiently. For example, cars with big engines that consume a lot of petrol, or urinals that pour lots of water constantly in shopping, more toilets. So these are some of the ways in which we are wasting resources. Right, not controlling the rate at which resources are used. For example, many fish from the oceans, right, throwing away resources instead of reusing and recycling, because there are some resources which can be recycled and reused. Right, so these are some of the ways in which we are wasting, and then I've got pictures inserted for you to see there. Right, the first one says chemicals from mines and industries can pollute natural resources. Right, this is the improper way of disposing of chemicals from industries or even from mines. The second one says young trees should be planted to replace trees that are cut down. So this mostly happens in rural areas where people use wood for energy. When they cut down trees, they do not plant them back again. This will also lead to the unwise usage of resources. And then driving cars that consume a lot of petrol, right? We have some cars that have huge engines that will just waste resources. Now let's take a look at overfishing and how overfishing will affect us. Right, overfishing has severely reduced the supply of fishing in the world's oceans. So we have scientists that predict what will happen if people continue to fish at the rate that they are fishing at the present moment. So if people continue to overfish, this will have devastating effects. So what will simply happen is that people may end up losing their jobs in the fishing industry, or people will also lose their source of food, because some people depend on fish for food. Now let's take a look at the causes of overfishing. So we have modern fishing methods and fishing technology that make it easier to catch more fish than we used to in the past. So you will find that the fact that we have these methods here, right, this is leading to overfishing. Right, modern methods includes larger fleets, factory ships, huge nets, electronic fish finders. Right, so the population of the world has doubled over the last 50 years. Hence, we need more fish for as a source of food, right, for us to eat or to consume. Right. The other causes of fishing are that more individuals and fishing companies are taking more fish from the world's oceans, as I mentioned. This is just a repetition. As I meant, to feed the extra people since the population is growing. Right. Another cause of overfishing, there is lack of international laws to control the quantity of fish that people may take from the world's oceans. So if there is no one controlling the quantity of fish that people are taking, we will sooner deplete all the fish resources. Now let's take a look at the effects of overfishing. Right? Overfishing reduces the amount of food available for people to eat. Right? Overfishing the oceans also affects many other plants and animals that live in the sea, or this affects marine life. A reduction in fish supply will lead to unemployment and increased poverty. And over 19 million tons of fish are caught from the world's oceans every year. So the fish population cannot reproduce fast enough to replace this amount of fish. So sooner than later, we will run out of all the fish reserves. Right. Now, in this slide here, I have a picture showing you the modern fishing technology that is used. Right, so you find that some of this technology will harvest a lot of fish, even some fish that is meant to be consumed. So that is also a problem. Right, some fish species you'll find that are in danger of becoming extinct. For example, the swordfish and the bluefin tuna. Right, now let's take a look at overgrazing and how overgrazing affects us. Right, so overgrazing happens when people keep too many animals on a piece of land. We call this process overstocking. Right, so when farmers overstock animals, overgrazing is bound to happen. So animals damage or eat more plants than the land can replace them. The land becomes degraded. So you'll find that soil erosion will occur after the land becomes degraded. Now let's take a look at the effects of overgrazing. Plants do not have enough time to grow before they are grazed. So this is a problem. We'll be left with bare patches on the soil, or bare patches will appear on the soil. Right, weeds and alien plants replace the grasses, and remember, alien plants have a habit of taking over, and then the soil is eroded by wind and water. The dams will fill up with soil that is washed off the land. And when the dams fill up, what will happen? This can also lead to the dams overflowing or flooding. Right, all these are the effects of overgrazing. Right, animals do not get enough nutrition from the remaining plants, the ones that you will find in the patches of land. Animals are less healthy, they become sick. Weak animals have fewer offspring, like cows, and weak animals produce less milk. So you can see that when you overstock animals, you are prone to lose more than gain. Now, let's go on and finish up on the effects, right? So young animals need more grass to replace milk. This leads to more overgrazing. Continued overgrazing will lead to desertification. Desertification is a process of the spread of deserts. All right, so desertification means that land is no longer productive. We cannot grow crops, we cannot practice agricultural activities, which is a huge loss to us human beings. Right, the land is no longer a useful resource. People will leave that land. So these are the effects of overgrazing. That's why we are supposed to be careful as farmers not to overstock animals. Now, let's take a look at a few terms that I want you guys to be aware of. Right, overfishing is taking more fish than nature can replace. And then we also have fish stocks. This is the available supply of fish. And then we have desertification. This is processes caused by human activities and climatic changes that reduce the quality of land in dry areas, or if you want, you can simply say it is the spread of deserts. Right, we've come to the end of the lesson, guys. I've got a fun picture there showing you animals that are overstocked and how we have bare patches on the land, showing you overgrazing. And then you can also see another picture, a car that is passing on a piece of land and how that land is bare. Right, all these processes will lead to soil erosion. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, guys. If there's anything you didn't understand, refer back to the previous slides, and it's always advisable to watch the lessons that come before this one on the dorKk platform. Till next time, bye.